imagine everybody knows who I am. I told Carol she didn't have to introduce me. I want to remind you that this whole double talk is about the death of art. We hope that the end of it, and also works in progress, because we can't, art's not going to disappear. It's just, I hope, going to stop being called art, because that just causes great confusion. And as I tried to point out to you last time, the great question of the 20th century is it art? And everybody asks that. See, it's thought of as the kind of thing that ignorant people or Philistines or somebody comes and says, well, it's all very well, but is it art? Well, the artists are asking exactly the same thing, and everybody else is asking it, because it's a great question of the 20th century, because the 19th century decided that it could define everything and measure everything and make everything really controlled and understood. And so what happens is the 20th century has simply rejected those definitions. And the artists, I believe, rejected them immediately, because they were not. See, it really isn't possible to define art. It isn't possible to define love. I have, in fact, a very strong feeling that you can't define anything unless you already know what it is. And you can try it. You see, I love to think of trying to define a peach. I expect there is a definition in the dictionary, though I haven't looked it up, and I'm quite sure that it wouldn't do you much good if you didn't already know what a peach is. And if you did, if you thought, well, a peach is a beautiful round piece of fruit that's sort of pinkish and yellowish, and then full of juice and would delight to bite into, and a wonderful scent and odor. Or a peach is a little hard round thing that's perfectly dreadful. If you eat it, you'll get terrible stomachache. So which is a peach? And they're both peaches. And are you just going to describe the ideal peach? Whatever it is, you see, you can't really do it unless people know what it is. And then they can say, yes, I think that's it, or no, I think that doesn't take care of it. But it is nonetheless not possible. And unless you make something simply huge, just could embrace everybody. A peach is something which everybody likes, or some people don't. You don't. It's just not one of the things that's it isn't very helpful to define something. It is sort of comforting if you already know what the thing is. It's a kind of affirmation of what you know, but otherwise it really does not help you. And when you get into something like love, or art, or even, food. I mean, one of the questions of the 20th century, when confronted by ostriches and insects and all kinds of things, is it food? It's also very interesting. Is it food? And it's exactly the same question. We don't know what anything is. And we're scared even to try to guess what anything, I don't care what it is, anything. Education. What is education? And if you read a curriculum, you say, well, that's very interesting, but is it education? I mean, it's a great 20th century question, which we simply inherited from the 19th century. And to my endless astonishment, because you see, I tried to point out to you last time that the artists have never been satisfied with the idea that art is sufficient unto itself, or the idea that art is primarily concerned with beauty. The artists are not satisfied with that, and they have never been. And their whole effort from the 19th century right to the present day is tied up with the question, is it art? That's interesting, but is it art? And then the other question, which is equally tied to it and really inextricable from it, is, am I an artist? Or is he an artist? And if you can answer, you see, the one, if you can say, he makes art, therefore he is an artist. Then the whole thing, then you know both what art is and what the art is something made by an artist. And anybody who makes art is an artist. You see, it's a wonderfully involved thing, but of course it doesn't get you anywhere at all, absolutely nowhere at all. You just get into the position of saying, not that, instead of feeling that it is satisfactory. And yet, the idea that art is two things, beautiful and excellent. When you say something is an art, you say what you think you're saying is that it's a wonderful thing. It's a superior thing. It's an excellent thing. And I always am so amused when people use this. They say this person is an artist in the kitchen. He's an artist as a cook. Well, you can hope he wasn't Jackson Pollock. It's well established that Jackson Pollock is an artist, and well, at least you need to clean up after. But it's just not. It isn't a term telling you that this thing is superior, elevating, splendid. Any of those things at all. That's what it isn't. And to hold on to that idea, now I'm not saying that it can't be, but it isn't necessarily. And to hold on to that idea that you say, oh, she makes an art of this and that, she makes an art of it, be positive. Just tap them on the shoulder and say, Mary Holmes says that's not right. That will certainly quiet them for a while. Anyway, but I'm bringing you, for your delectation and delight, a sweatshirt which was given to me, and it says art on it, big letters, and then it also has a definition of art. Printed across it, and it is exactly the one I'm talking about. Is the one that's most disastrous for art. And it says, the production of the beautiful in a graphic or plastic medium. You see, right away they're saying only these things. The only sculpture and painting, or some drawing or something like it, would be even accessible to the idea of being art. And then it goes on, it says, and finally it says, the scientific study of objects of art. Well, of course, I don't blame her for not being able to define it any better. I think I always like to give the example of Plato's definition of beauty, which he considered, one of the great ultimate forms and every way desirable and so on. But he said that beauty is that in the object which makes it beautiful. Well, you see, you can't argue with that. But you're not advanced anywhere along the way, but you're just, that's it. Beauty is beauty, and that's enough, or you know. Anyway, that's all you're going to know from that. So the idea of trying to find out what art is and what an artist is a great preoccupation of our time. And actually, the history of art simply, in modern times, simply follows this. So, is it like this? Is it like that? And if we can look at our dear old familiar first two slides that we had last time, if we could have them again for a moment. One of them, and the next one just for a second. And we all know, my dear, that's had some serious difficulties, which makes it much more interesting. I hope that the artist who named Mr. Klein would be grateful to me for having made it more complex. But it still is not beyond your small child, so maybe it isn't too complex. It looks like it might be something articulate. Anyway, all of us know, and we did know, and always will know, that if somebody stood in front of those two figures, we know which one they would say, is it art about? And the one, let's look back at the other one for a second. And you see, exactly the same thing that's on this sweatshirt is the principle that's behind people thinking, without having to think, that this is art. And they know it, and they know it for the wrong reasons, almost certainly. And one of them is that it is essentially not useful. Well, it's on the principle that it's sufficient unto itself. And that is one of the most dreadful things to say about anything that you can even imagine. So to say that art is useless is to denigrate it into something which is really of no use to anybody, and which is therefore can be thought of as some kind of a frill, that you don't have to pay attention to art, because it's really just something you know that might be around, but it's not going to bother anything. It's nice for little children to have art. They should have lots of art. But for grown people, that's another question. And this is exactly the way people feel. I mean, they really feel that. And then many people think, well, it's not even very important for children to have anything to do with art, because they think it's some kind of frill, something which is really extra. And let's look at the next one. And the truth of the matter is that we've known always what art is, and we do know it right this minute, and we know it without anybody defining it. And we know, if we know anything about the history of mankind, that it is an enormous source of power, and that it is dangerous. And if we didn't know it, all we have to do is defer to the Ten Commandments and to realize that both God and Moses, or one or the other, or together, recognize one very serious thing, which is that we are going to make graven images. And if we don't look out, we're going to bow down to them and worship them. So that you know two things that are about us, and it was true then, and it was true this minute, and it will always be true. And that we are people, we are a thing, a group, a species, or whatever, that makes graven images and will not stop. You can't stop us from doing it. We're going to do it, and we will do it, and everybody will and must do it. And why do we? Well, for one thing, we're the only people, the only creatures that can do it, because we're the only ones that can understand a symbol. Now, dogs and horses and all kinds of animals recognize all kinds of different things, but they don't recognize a symbol in the same way that we do. And our language, of course, is dependent on it. Our writing and on everything that we ever make is dependent on our recognition of symbols. And we can do it, and I can show you how easy it is by making a drawing in the air. How many of you can see my hand? Can you see it okay? Mm-hmm. And I'm going to make a big circle, and I'm going to put a dot there and a dot there, and I'm going to put a curve down there. And what do we have? All right. We have a happy face. And all of you can see it. See, it's drawn in the air. You can see, even if I just said, think of a circle, put two dots in it, one on one side, one on the other. Make a curve underneath them. You know that in your mind would come this image, you see, this extraordinary image that's not anything like a human being at all, you know. I mean, not at all. To have a really round face, you've had to be taking prednisone for 30 years. And to have two little dots for eyes would be a serious disability. And not to mention this curve of your new moon mouth that's under these two little dots. And yet, you see, there isn't a person in the world that doesn't think that's a face. And the least child, the most ancient and educated, know that is a symbol of a face. It's not like a face. And you could spend a lot of time trying to figure in what ways is it sufficiently like a face to be convincing to you. And it's really very hard to figure it out, because of this deep disparity between what it is and what we look like. So that capacity of ours means that we can deal with symbols. And we can do it very easily. We do it naturally and easily, no trouble at all. And therefore, we can make graven images, which are so real to us, though we know they're not. I mean, they can be an outline, and yet it can be so powerful that it actually makes us bow down and worship. And this just happens endlessly, and always has, and probably always will. And then the other thing is that to make a graven image not only is itself a great joy and a necessity to us, and something we cannot do, but also to feel that power that is inherent in the graven image. You see, we can feel that, and we do feel it, and it's part of our symbolizing ability, but it's something which is just intoxicating, and you can't not do it. And if you think that art is just something which is frivolous or playful or belongs to a whole different order of being, then you are the prey of people who use art to exercise their power. And I think that the great rise and the extraordinary spread of the visual aspects of advertising occurred at exactly the time that people were unprepared for it. They didn't realize that they were going to be. Now, I think people now are more sophisticated about it, not much, but a little bit. And so that they know that the effort is being made to influence, actually to have power over them. And that is part of why it exists. I always say that if you want to know people that are really in awe of art, you go to advertising, because they can see how powerfully it can change people. Far more than the dean of the arts, who only sees people kind of as some little consent to cultural needs or something like that. That's not what it is at all. And let's look at the next one. Now, as I said, the artists are trying to see, this artist is saying, is this art? He's essentially saying that. And when he put it down, he didn't know. He couldn't tell. It was something which was very very hazardous and daring, and to actually do it and say that what essentially he is saying is, it is art, and I am an artist. And yet what he's showing us has nothing to do with what's on his sweatshirt, nothing at all. And in the next one also, let's look at the next one, which is exactly the opposite. It says that art is something which is of great purity, and insofar as it doesn't show an image, insofar as it doesn't concede to any of the things which are about the beautiful and so on, then it is art. But the truth is that this itself becomes an image. And it becomes an image of very great power, and one which is very attractive to people. And it has, of course, this is Mondrian, and though he wanted it to be something else, he wanted it to be something which was really only accessible to the elite, and something which was had to do with the most sublime concentrations on purity and perfection and order, exactly the opposite of the Jackson Pollock. this isn't what happened. What happened was that this became an image. It became an image of order and of a kind of marvelous modern indifference to the scrubby old human being. The same kind of thing, which of course is part of architecture, that is not interested in being homey or comfortable, but exactly the opposite. And so the one thing that it certainly tells us, let's look at the next slide, is that the intention of the artist is very obscure. It's very difficult to say what the intention of the artist is. Often the intention is absolutely invisible to you by the time the thing is made. It's not something that you have to judge the thing as it is. And here's again, this is Philip Guston, that's the next one, because this again, his whole life in art was literally dedicated to finding out whether it was art that he was making, whether it was really a work of art, and therefore was he really an artist. And the tragic outcome of his life, in which he came to the conclusion that what an artist was simply a person with a hand and brushes. That conclusion was based really on the wrong question, because the question should be, what is it for? What does art do? Not what it is, but what does it do? What is it to be for? And here again, this is, if it isn't that beautiful woman, is it also the poignancy of old clothes? So that this, and how they become like something living, like an idol, like something actually living. This old shoes tucked in the open shirt, and the sleeves hanging down like great pillars. What you feel is something which is very poignant, which is when we die and leave behind clothes and shoes, they contain something of us. Then they speak about us, and they actually take our shape. They take the form of us. The old shoes look like the feet that wore them, and now the feet are gone. So it has that kind of poignancy. Let's look at our dependence on the physical world. Let's look at the next slide. And again, that vision of the artist as I, and as self-destructive. As the easel becomes something like a scaffold. And beside his eye, he is smoking, not one, but really 2 cigarettes, and time is passing. So that the mortality of the artist is always uppermost. And the feeling that what he is an eye. It is to see the thing, and it is to capture the actual sight. And let's look at the next one, with his palette up there. And then this, where again, the sources of his joy are destructive, so that he's smoking, and it is something which is necessary, and it was actually to him as necessary. Does that have some significance? I don't know. Come on. Anyway. 2 cigarettes. And of course the watch on his arm. So, and this is true. He was killing himself with liquor and cigarettes, and died young, or relatively young. Let's look at the next slide. But that is, you see, that is where he ends with this extraordinary, sad conclusion of all that he is someone who can paint, who has brushes, and who is worn out. Now, if he had only come to terms with the, let's look at the next slide, with the fact of what the artist is, the fact that we are image makers, And we will make them, graven images, we will make, and we always have to make them, and why we make them, and that this is something which is inescapable for us. If we can't make them, we buy them. If we can't, actually there's an island, it's very, very rare for people not to have an art of their own, but there is an island in the South Pacific where the people have never made art, but they buy it from the other people. They trade for it and buy it. Because we need it, we want it. We are lovers of the image, we are makers of the image, and this is as much a part of our nature as any other thing. And it is a part of it, which is species specific. And the result of that, the result of the effort may make people do something like this, which is to just drop a load of dirt on the floor. But you see, it is on the principle that whatever the artist makes is art. And then the assurance that you're an artist, therefore what you do is art. And you know, this is carried to the extreme at the present time. I could cite you no end of examples, but one of my favorite examples is a gallery in New York which sells the feces of artists in well-capped bottles. And it is on exactly this principle. See, the artist makes art. It doesn't matter, you see, whether he sweats it out or excretes it, but because he is an artist, then what he makes is art. And therefore, this is art, and then he's an artist. So it's this wonderful kind of thing. But it can have very peculiar results, and results which don't take into account the most important single thing, which is it any good? See, that's absolutely the only significant question. It's not whether it is art or not. That doesn't matter. It may matter to some, or it doesn't matter, but still, the question is, has it value? Is it any good? And for most people, they're paralyzed by the word art to such an extent that they can't even imagine the phrase bad art. But there is a lot of it. And they might as well get used to it. It is not that art is always good, and that when you say art, it means it's good. It's the opposite. It has to be judged always, whether you call it art or not. And that's something that we always do. You see, as human beings, we do it automatically. We never enjoy anything until we've judged it. And this is true of our, what somebody's wearing, or what the way they do their hair, or whatever. Our great endless joy is to judge the very graven images that we also cannot do without, you see. So it is part of our nature, and it is part of our nature to judge anything. And you could certainly, I think, you could be quite confident to say that not is it art, but since it's art, what good is it? What value is it? Does it have any quality of enlightening us or giving us a better understanding of life? There are a lot of ways to get that. Maybe this isn't the best. Now, let's look at the next. Now, I want to show you the work of Marcel Duchamp, and I want you, part of the reason that I want you to look at him for a while is because he stands for a whole, really the whole of modern art. You can't talk about it unless you come to terms or come to some recognition of him. He was involved in all of the activities, all of the kinds of the different styles and this and that, Dada and Cubism, and finally, in the 1920s, he said the thing which I believe, and which I believe other artists who have who thought about it or who experienced it believe also, which is that this is no time to be a public artist. That it is time, as Marcel Duchamp said in 1920, he said the climate of the public art, that is the art of gallery, the art of trading and so on, is a bad climate for the artist. And if he lives in it, it will destroy him. And so he stopped painting publicly in the 20s. He felt that at that time, what we have seen, of course, in a much more exaggerated way, that it is not congenial to the artist to have anything to do with it. And what he was reputed to do, and this is what is very fascinating, he was reputed to have stopped painting and spent the rest of his life playing chess. And this was taught everybody in graduate school when I was in graduate school, and I'm sure is still probably taught by many people, because he stated it, you see, that he was not going to have anything to do with it. But what he did was go right ahead, making images, and in fact more and more exact and illusionistic images. This is one of the things which he did in 1912, when the whole first movement of Cubism was going on, and also a kind of variation on it, which was more mechanical, or having to do with the nature of things as we've seen. Let's look at the next slide, because the next slide is one of his great paintings, and you see he always stood for something which the other artists were thinking about or about to do or have continued to do any number of things. He was the first person to show what were called ready-mades, and he showed a urinal in one of the art exhibits. Why? Because he felt that anything which we made as human beings was a work of art. And it wasn't necessarily good, and it wasn't necessarily uplifting or depraved or anything else. It was simply, this is one of the things which we make. And because we always try to make whatever we make something which is made right, it has the quality of being made right for what it is. And of course it scandalized everybody, and they just carried on, they could not understand this at all, because it's complete disagreement with my friend de Swetster. So it is something which was very difficult, but then of course now it's perfectly easily accepted, and people even think that they're quite daring. I read a marvelous thing written by the man who is the curator of the Museum of Modern Art in San Francisco, who said that he was going to have a show which had a kitchen sink in it. And he said, I know this is a breakthrough, this is a daring edge of art. Well, you know, this was in 1989 or something. And I kept thinking, didn't he ever hear of Marcel? And I know perfectly well that he could not have avoided hearing it if he'd even ever stepped into a museum. And then this extraordinary thing, which he started working on in 1915, and he never finished it until 1923. He worked on it all the time. What is it? It's a big glass. It is just, that's what it is. It's called the Great Glass. And its title is a kind of title of surrealism or Dadaism. The bride stripped bare by her bachelor's Eva. The bride stripped bare by her bachelor's Eva. Well, there's no sign, of course, of a bachelor or a bride, or whether or not she's stripped bare. It has nothing to do with that. It is a way of teasing. And you hear, and these all these various things. But the extraordinary, the thing which is so amazing is, as an idea, is that it is on glass, and therefore it changes constantly. You see, people walk around the sign, then they're suddenly in the picture. And anything that happens, wherever you set it down, the picture changes. I mean, the glass is simply transparent, so it becomes a part of the environment, and the environment is immediately part of it. So it is completely the opposite of what people think of the work of art being. You see, something which has a kind of life, a continuous life, and is always in a way the same, or very nearly the same, instead of never having any kind of that kind of life. And then what is in it, there are various objects, and they're given peculiar names, like the coffee machine, the chocolate machine, which is in there, and scissors, and all kinds of objects are there, but then they constantly change, you see, just by the existence of the glass itself. Let's look at the next slide. There's one of the objects which is in the glass. And it has simply seen as a detail, but it hasn't any, you wouldn't really know, I think, what it is. So it's called a chocolate machine and scissors. You better see that if you wish. Let's look at the next one. But then what happened, you see? He didn't spend the time from 1920 until the time he died, which is very recently, playing chess. Instead, he made these extraordinary things, and he made them all of the time, and he called them valises. And they were little pieces of luggage. And he called this a one-man show. Because, let's look at the next thing. You open them, and there it was. You can see it. Open. And then all kinds of things. The references to his great important for early painting called the New Descending Stairs, kind of early Cubism, and then all kinds of things from the great glass. And then when you look at it, comes little tiny landscapes and every kind of graven image that you ever would want to see, he has packed into this valise and then has closed it up. And he made a great many, but he also had other people making them for him, his daughter and so on, making them because he felt that this was something which was kind of secret craftsmanship, that he could make these images and could show other people how to make them, but then to make them completely secret, absolutely without any kind of connection. What is the need behind this? The need is to make the image and then maybe protect the image or keep it close. Let's look at the next one. You can see what a marvelous possibility it has. There is an actual, the one on the upper left is the New Descending the Stairs, but in a little tiny version, you see. And it's other paintings of his that he's just made into the valises. Let's look at the next one. I think that Marcel Duchamp was saved from bothering and worrying about what was art and what wasn't art and whether he was an artist or not an artist because he was involved with Dadaism as a young man. That's right before the First World War, during the war. The development of Dadaism was simply a group of friends who said nothing has any value. Nothing has any value at all. And it is all foolish, and whether it's truth or whether it's religion or whether it's art, these things have no real meaning. And they used to do extraordinary things like announce that there was going to be a meeting, actually a little party for Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford at a certain place in Paris. And of course there was not going to be any such thing at all. But they would put out flyers telling that people would go flocking there. They couldn't even find the address, and then if they found anything close, it was an empty lot. And then they just enjoyed that. They didn't go to watch, they just thought, how nice. All those people have been pulled on like a pure, it's a pure joke, just because there isn't any such thing as truth. There isn't any such thing as art. And so this, in a way, that I think this freed Duchamp from any of these obligations, and he did just what he wanted. And what he wanted was to make a graven image, whether it was graven or not, he wanted to make it. And I think that this is, I think the only way that we can understand the production of art is because people have a need for it. And we have a need for images. We have a real need. Now, when I say need, I know that it's hard to come some way to understand it. Because a need is, I believe, always for something which is invisible. It's not anything which is easily, or has anything to do with appetite or greed or anything like that. It's something very difficult to isolate and very difficult to comprehend and very difficult to fulfill. I have a nephew who, when he was a little boy, about, just beginning to talk, used to say, "I need a cookie." And you see, we all thought that was quite, funny, because most people say, "I want a cookie," as soon as they can have any command. But it seems to me that this is a very profound difference. And the cookie represented something which was beyond cookiehood. It was way beyond it. He needed the cookie. He wasn't hungry, and he didn't have an appetite for it, and all of those things. He needed it because it constituted something, it fulfilled something that was not the cookie, but it was way beyond it. And I think that's exactly what we do about images. We need an image, and we need the image because otherwise we can't really believe in whatever it is. And particularly if it's a dream that we have, or an idea that we have, or an image that we want to bring into the world. Why do we want to bring it into the world? So that it can be part of the known thing and a believed in thing. Because seeing is believing. And so the most extraordinary visions that people have, they long to make material, make actual a part of the world. And one of the great instructions about what art is and what it's about is, I think this idea is illustrated by Simon Rodion, who built the watchtowers in Los Angeles. Now, you see, why did he make these? Obviously, this is something which is very difficult to make, very hard to make, very demanding, and it consumed actually almost his whole life. And he never said why he did it. He had a need to see these towers, to see these things, and therefore he spent his life making them. And then, you see, this is, I believe, the absolute secret of the thing. Once that need was met, they meant nothing to him, and he left. And he never came back to that area, never came back to Los Angeles. And left them there, as he said, for the community. And they are this creation of something which is just an amazing thing. And let's look at some of the details of it. Now, he worked in construction, and so he had access and knowledge of how to do this. And let's look at the next slide from there, because you see how, I mean, this is an enormous, it's an enormous project, and it took the whole body of his life until he was an old man. And he was able to do it because he had worked in construction. And 20 years ago or more, the city of Los Angeles, this is actually in Watts, decided that it was a hazard. They thought it was dangerous because suppose it tipped over. Well, everybody would be squashed all around it, you see. So they decided that they would tear it down. And of course, many people jumped up and down and said they shouldn't and so on, but they said, well, we have to on account of we don't want to squash all those people when it falls down. So they went, and with all the most powerful machines that they could, they tried to tear it down, and they could not. And they tied things around it and then drove off merrily, and whatever they were driving was snapped back. And the tower perfectly unaffected, totally unaffected. It wasn't even a chip out of it. Instead of it tottering over. And this was, of course, absolutely astounding and also terribly embarrassing. And everybody concerned with it was just extremely embarrassed that this had ever happened. And that all of their engineers who had made all these plans, you see, and plots showing how it was unstable and how it was bound to fall over, and even a strong wind would have it knocked over. And instead of that, of course, nothing knocked it over, and nothing has knocked it over. So then they said, well, then it's an object of art, and it's a park, and there it is. Now the tourist attraction. But can you imagine? This is made by one man. This is made by one person. It's not a whole group of people working on it. Let's look at the next one. And what does it represent? And then all kinds of people have asked, and he never would answer. And there's no answer. It is the embodiment. It is the bringing down into the world of a dream of something rising tremendously and being marvelously complex and beautifully rich in color and in movement and everything else. It's a dream of bringing that into the world, and so that it can be seen, so that it can be experienced by everybody, and therefore be truer than if it were stayed only in the mind. And I think that also that the fact that we are material creatures living in the actual world, we want these things to be clear. We want them to be available. We want them to be something which we can see and touch and feel and know the reality of. And that's their great benefit, that they give us this experience, this wonderful complexity of this thing. Let's look at the next one. I have several of these. And they have a lot in common with all kinds of things like Hindu temples and all things which he'd never, or almost certainly never seen. And people think of them as like the masts of a ship, which again he'd never seen. So it is really, I think, a dream of something rising from the ground and being of great power and great complexity and always standing or staying there as a center point of power. And for that is something which we can experience when we see it. Let's look at the next one. Every kind of thing. When you actually go there, of course, it's always true that something it's impossible to reproduce any kind of work of art at all. And actually, when you're there, you can see the marvelous diversity and the movement from colors and into shapes and back again, so that it's constantly moving. It's one of the most actively moving images that I think that's ever been made. It has some of the quality, the soaring quality that Gothic architecture has, but it also has something which is intimate, so that you come across a little broken teacup in it, and all kinds of objects that he set in the there's a whole wall of things which he finds. had no idea, there's no sense whatever that he was trying to make a work of art, not that at all. He was trying to come into the actual world, some kind of vision or dream, and take a shape which could be seen and could be, thereby became doubly and triply real. And this is, I think, the great continuing secret. Let's look at the next slide. And of course, it was done over a long period of time. It's necessary. Anything this, it has to have held his delight and interest over this whole long period of time, of years. Let's look at the next one. It's marvelous that you almost never see any double thing. Now, I also, because I've been very strongly moved by the idea that really what the artist does, what any of us who make works of art aim to do, is to fulfill a need. To make something which you know inside of yourself, and something which you must have outside of yourself. That it becomes real, it becomes powerful, exactly with all the great, tremendous power that art has, by being outside of you, by actually being out into the world. Now, that is really the opposite of the idea that art is its own excuse for being. Art is the answer. The making of something is the answer to a need which is felt and which is very deep. And of course, if the need is very profound and it is a need that other people feel as well, it will have a life of tremendous power. And it will be treasured. It will be treasured because it has this, because it contains this quality of fulfilling a need. And part of the reason an artist makes anything, she made them with the idea that they should be right. And she worked on them. She would feel that they weren't right, and she would be cross about it. And she would even hit them for not being right. And then she would work some more until they were right. And then they were finished, and she was perfectly uninterested. She was really doing the watchtowers on a very small scale, but equally satisfactory, equally filling a need. And she got exactly as the watchtower Simon got, whatever she needed from any place that she could find it. And so she would, as you can see, this marvelous contraption which she made has got part of a beer cap, thing you open the beer cans with at this end. And then other things, well, you can tell there's a rubber band around that, holding it together. But it becomes something, and this, you see, this is what was so fascinating, that she could in her mind see this thing. And then the terrible, difficult thing, and the thing which is constantly a challenge to all of us, is to bring what is in the mind into the world, to make it to incarnate it, to make it in the flesh, to make it in the reality, in the physical, material reality. And so let's look at the next one. She had now you see, this is a marvelous creature that she's made, and it took exactly as it did with Reveal. It took time to do this, and very often, as I said, she would feel disappointed, and of course this is absolutely inevitable because it's the most difficult thing in the world, to incarnate something, to take something out of the dream and out of the imagination and give it a place in the world. And it is always a disappointing act because you cannot do the whole thing. You cannot get what's really in your mind out into the world. It's just not possible to do it. And what you have to be satisfied with is the approximation. And you can work on it as she did. And you can see that her medium is very often Kleenex. In fact, she's the Kleenex artist of the 20th century. This one has a kind of jollity. Let's look at the next one, which has this curious rose quality. But it's made from a toothpaste, toothbrush, as you can see the bottom of the toothbrush, a little bit at the top, and Kleenex. And it took a long time to make. It took a lot of disappointment and success and all of the emotions which we all feel as people who make something. And when we make it, it's the same exact thing. Let's look at the next. Another, this is a combination of Kleenex and a paper towel, which is a slight departure in her usual. But it has that kind of curious density. You see, it's a little private thing. It's just completely tied into itself and is perfectly indifferent to all of us outside. It is a little secret thing. Let's look at the next one. Much more extravagant, much more a great joy in the colors and the whole thing. And I think it has a butter knife as a basic thing. And in fact, she has really a very definite style. The style is that something is wrapped up, and then the wrapping has some kind of binding. And this is what she does over and over and over again. And sometimes she wrapped up money, and you could never see it, you see. But it was in there. And it has a whole great joy of making something which is secret. And let's look at the next one. And then, now here she's moved into a different medium, because that's a dog bone that's and she would never, and this wasn't, she didn't intend to make what you see here. She intended to make goodness knows what, but it's not, and what we see is this figure leaning on some kind of a staff. It's really her most illusionistic effort. And but again, it's not so. It's not what she intended, but what she got was something certainly much more interesting than what she intended. And it is still the same principle of wrapping and binding, but now it has taken on an extraordinary kind of life. And the edge of the dog bone becomes a wonderful face, you know. This is somebody leaning on it. So but this is, when I watched her do this, and she did it all the time in the last maybe 2 or 3 years of her life. She'd walk around the house and see something, ordinarily Kleenex, and then she would make something. So that looked to her, exactly as when watchtowers were built, looking at a teapot, I think, or looking at a cup, or looking at an old tile, and he would say, I can incorporate that. That will make more glorious the thing which I'm making. And it's exactly what all artists always feel, that they can take this thing and make it transcendent, make it be more than it would have been otherwise. Raise it to some kind of the heights or the depths, because you couldn't move in either direction, of making it something more than it was, transcending, at the same time bringing it into the physical world and transcending the physical world. And that's exactly what she did, exactly what is done. And it doesn't matter about let's look at the next slide, it doesn't matter about your intention, and it doesn't matter too much about what is made. What is the excitement and what is the thing which makes us constantly always make an image is something in itself so satisfactory. And the larger meaning it has, the more it extends into other people's experience, the greater joy on the part of the artist. Now, and I also became aware of this because I discovered late in life now, you know, I'm 85 years old, and I discovered about last year that I never make anything that, because, except for the fact that I need it. I do not make it. And I need it, and then corollary, I cannot buy it. I would 1,000 times rather buy it, but I can never find it. And if I could find it, like in some great museum somewhere, I couldn't afford to buy it. So I'm stuck with it. I have to make it. If I want it, I have to make it. And I maybe get help in some direction or another, but the true thing is I need it. I want it, and I've got to make it because I can't buy it, I can't steal it, I can't find it anywhere else, I can't persuade anybody else to make it exactly the way I want it, so on. So this was a revelation to me. You know, I really didn't know that this was what was causing me to paint all the things I've painted all my life. But it became clear to me because of this extraordinary moment when I decided that I wanted a labyrinth. Now, you know that you can't buy one, and if you want a labyrinth, you've got to make it. There isn't anything else to do. I mean, that's what you've got to do. And why did I want a labyrinth? Well, that has many mysterious depths of meaning, which I won't bore you with. But the first meaning to me is that it is the oldest image made by human beings, and that is made all over the world and throughout time. The labyrinth was traced by the Stone Age people on the wall. It wasn't something you had to walk. But this pattern, and this is the most ancient pattern, the seven turns, and said something in the middle of it. And it was on the wall. But this pattern, and this is the most ancient pattern, the seven turns, and said something in the middle of it. And it was on the Stone Age. It was in Egypt. It was in Rome. It was in Greece. It was in Japan, China, India, all over Africa, all over the world. A labyrinth has been made. It's very different from a maze. A maze is a kind of modern thing, and a maze is something that's meant to amaze you, and it does amaze you. Because it has walls and you can't tell whether you've gone the right path or not. Labyrinth has only one path, you can't get lost. It always enters on the third turn. It has an absolutely stable form, and it is the same all over the world. And then the great wonderful thing is nobody knows what it was ever made for. And it was it's in every cathedral. It was in front of all of those, as many of the little chapels or whatever. All churches had a labyrinth. And what was it for? And then all from outside, all over the country, great numbers of them in Sweden, which were not associated with churches, and in Germany, and in fact all over Europe, and then all over the world. And right up into the 20th century, the Indians of the Southwest weave a labyrinth into the baskets that they make. the bottom of the basket is apt to be a labyrinth. And it may contain an animal in the center. And you see, this is absolutely inexplicable. I mean, there's nobody has really made any explanation of why it's true. But there it is. And this so fascinates me. And then I wanted one just to join the crowd. I thought this is what human beings do. They make a labyrinth, and I'm going to do it too and see what happens. And that's exactly what I did. But then I wanted to make I wanted to make it have some kind of meaning. And what I did was make drawings on the whole thing that are the story of creation. There's the drawings of first you enter the labyrinth here where it's darkness, blackness, and chaos, then into order and light. You can see it when you go from the gray to the dark and black, and then into very orderly and light and light itself. And then the Hebrew word that is tov, which means it's good. And it goes on then throughout the whole the separation of light and dark, and angels holding up the firmament, the whole story. And then finally the creation of Adam and Eve, and finally the middle. And in the middle I put the yang yin because I believe that all action, all meaning, and all activity and creativity come from the union of opposites. And the yang yin is the great. And then I had the labyrinth, and I wanted it to have a pleasant place to be, and so I made a garden on one side. And then when I made a garden on one side, I had to do something about the other side, which was just the side of a building. And so I put I made I don't know what to call it, mural, something on a wall, and but I made it with traffic paint because I figured that was good, sturdy paint, and I was too lazy to make it in the proper way, really on fresco, and so my joy of drawing in it, and then of putting a key of light there, so that the labyrinth has a nice place to live. And then beyond it is the chapel. Also made. Let's look at I've got a couple of little details. And then you can see the chapel. Now you see, once you start something, it's hard to stop. I quite understood about the Watchtower because things call into being something else because you need them. You see, the labyrinth needed something which was softening and something which was join it really in a way, and then really then it needed a chapel, and then that needed a fountain, and and it needed a wall, and out of all of this, it was 2 years of solid work and continuous discovery of something else that I need, which I can't buy and I can't steal and I can't persuade anybody else. So let's look at the next slide. That's one of the angels holding up the firmament on the labyrinth, and that's the tail of the winged lion, and then in the firmament, all of the astrological signs. You can see those are Pisces, and there's the ram up there. Let's look at the next one. And then the Eve being created from the side of Adam. I'm very happy about this. Now, you see, they've been making labyrinths for at least 4,000, probably close to 40,000 years. And nobody ever made one in cement. And nobody ever drew them. So I have, and not only that, nobody ever had a pink one. So I rejoice in that distinction. that I can at the same time join this ancient pattern, and yet because of the material, I can make something entirely different from it. Let's look at the next one. In that beautiful there's a chapel. It's really three chapels, three. Let's look at the next slide so that we can get something into it. Now, see, I needed a chapel. Why? For one thing, the Episcopal Church has disappointed me by taking a turn toward heresy that is not very comfortable idea that really there's not much to worship and there's not much truth in anything having to do with the Christian story, and that we're better off just taking care of the poor. So I split from them, or they split from me. Well, now I have my own chapel, and furthermore, I needed a chapel because it's the only thing that's suitable for background for my paintings. Because my paintings are always having to do with something to do with the nature of the spiritual life. And so now I have a place for them. And they're comfortable there as they would never be in any kind of a gallery. That's what the next I never want to show you. And making this wall, you see, is a great joy. It's a bottle wall, and you just stick bottles and then pour cement, and there it is. Now it's everything. Let's look at the next one. There's the tree of life. It's so needed. Let's look at the next one. Next one. Now, in the past, there was never any question about what it was that art did, or what it was. The word didn't exist. People didn't ever use it, and in fact, the only time that it's used is in that phrase, that Latin phrase that many people know, which is "Ars longa, vita brevis est." Ars longa, ours is long, and vita brevis est. Life is short. And what that was that phrase is from a medical treatise, and I'd like to think anyway, that it had to do with the bowels. I can't remember whether it was in one direction or the other, but I think it had to do with them. And it's what it means is that the art, that is the skill of curing anybody of anything, takes a long time. And it may take too long, and life is short. But it had nothing to do with what we call art. It's just been lifted from that and made to stand for something which is really perfectly sentimental kind of an idea. But if you ever see the sign, I hope that you will enjoy it, especially. Now, what the artist has always done, and it still does, is record. And to record what happened. And it may be something which you saw, it may be something you heard about, maybe any number, or maybe a person, it may be anything. But it is to record it, to hold it there, because we know that in time, things are lost. And if you can make it there and present and in the world, it stops time. And it tells you what happened. And it may be something as this is an apocalyptic image. It's the image from the apocalypse of the horses, coming. Well, it's one of the things that people always are falling down to death here at the foreground. The others are plague and war and so on. But one of the great things you see about making an image is that it tames the thing. It at the same time makes it more powerful, but it makes it contained. So that though that we're seeing this, and seeing this figure of death, and the people all falling down before it, and all of the horses, the very fact that when you see this, you see men and horses, and you think, well, I can deal with them. I mean, it's not like, it's far more manageable than, than just the statement that the pale horse on the pale rider and the people falling dead before him. As soon as you can see it, it enters our world and therefore becomes something which is part of what we comprehend. And it brings what was a terrible and great threat of the apocalypse and the terrible things that are going to happen, the opening of the seals and the plagues falling on the world, all of this in Revelations, becomes something which is in a way more manageable as soon as it's made visible. Let's look at the next. At once we can believe it, and also we cannot. We can feel it, we can manage it. And of course, such a thing as this is Napoleon, one of his battles. You see, what this is doing is trying to record it, and it's trying. But any record is actually always, tempered by the person recording and by the time in which it's made. So there, what we see is what the artist chooses for us to see. But we feel that we have seen it. And this is the thing which everybody thought when the camera was invented would be the end of it. That there wouldn't be any more need, you see, to make anything like this because the camera could take a picture of it. But what they found out, and this was an absolute astonishment because it's the opposite of the direction of the Industrial Revolution in general, is that once the camera was invented, this immediately made it possible for a tremendous number of people to be artists. They didn't have to record it. But then and instead of it stopping artists, there have been more artists until I think at the present time there's almost nobody who would ever say, I'm not an artist. Of some kind, and certainly not a painter. I mean, there's no reason why as long as they sell those wonderful kits, there's absolutely no reason to hold anybody back. And yet that whole business of recording became something which they didn't have to do. They could do. They didn't have to. The next time. And of course, that great joy of recording our own selves of people. This is an anonymous painting early in America. No one has any idea who painted it, but it's painted for the same reason that my mother made those things, because they wanted to hold into the real world, the image of their child, and the person who painted it did his best. And consequently, this marvelously happy infant lives right on for 300 years, you see, without any change at all, and has been a delight to people from that time to the present. I mean, you cannot, it's almost impossible to look at this and not smile, because you have a reaction to this sublimely pleased and happy infant smiling away on his cushion. His little feet like straight out. Let's look at the next slide. You know that this is a record. You know that this person looked at this child. Let's look at the next one. Or this, see here again, this is a record of an appearance. It's a record that's holding in the world the thing which was in the world. And that is, of course, a great joy to us. Let's look at the next. And then the human face, of course, endlessly fascinating to us, and has been all through the ages. There's no period in art in which the human face was not used. It is a thing which absorbs us and fascinates us, mystifies us, and whether it's seen with great attention to physical detail, or whether, as almost all recording is actually revelation, it reveals something, it doesn't just record. And this is a revelation of this extraordinary faith, great thoughtfulness and dream. Let's look at the next one. And here's another. This artist, who is a contemporary artist, never paints anything but a face. And they have, then you have this terrible thing that they have such a subtle quality that they can't be reproduced. I just reproduced them, just show you this reproduction without any hope that you can get the full quality of it, but you might get some of the quality of mystery and reverence toward the face, toward our mysterious man. Let's look at the next one. Recording, and it is the power of the imagination, and that wants to make the image. The imagination creates the image and wants it to be in the world. And then you have this marvelous street scene, which is done, a beach scene, which is done by a young painter in this area, and which is a wonderfully formal. The clouds and the people are like clouds, and clouds are like the people, lined up or in order, and like sail, everything, deepest sense of order, with also at the same time a sense of the joyous casualness of the beak, doing tricks and standing on the head, all kinds of wonderful entertainments that are allowed. Let's look at the next one. There's another painter whose work I think shows as much as anything is the desire to make the image exist in the real world, and that image coming from inside and not having necessarily any previous exterior existence. It's not something which is done from models. It's something which is done from the dream, the image inside of the head, that allows this curious kind of mystery and ceremony. We don't know what the ceremony is. Let's look at the next. This is a painting called Eve Burning the Tree of the Knowledge of Good and Evil. And it's a wonderful, as all of Teresa Ellis's work has this strong intellectual quality, but it never loses its vivid imagination or its imagery, and its private, personal empathy. Let's look at the next one. That's a little out of focus. Again, let's look at the next one. Now I'm going to show you three delightful animals, because this is one of the great things that can happen. The animal form of the animal is familiar enough with us for variations to take place without destroying a sense of the animal. And the great joy and function of art, and the reason I suppose that we so much enjoy images, is because we can escape in them. We can actually enter them. And so when you look at this marvelous dog, you become part dog. You can't help it, because he's so energetic and so strange and so unlike a dog and so like a dog, and so that there's room for you to feel all his peculiar and dubious look, which is a look that a great many dogs have, and for very good reason. And he is, in his color and his everything, he has this burning and strange kind of reality inside of himself. Let's look at the next one. And here's the delightful horse. This is done. Is really an invention of the Persian Terry Fennell who made it. And all of the spiritedness, you see, the fun, really, the delight is bringing together things which are opposite, bringing together the things which are non-horse in a horse, and therefore giving the horse some kind of greater liveliness or greater surprise, and it's something which is a delight to bring these things together, and we can enjoy this kind of coltishness and the heaviness of the leg and the whole thing, and this aspiring and interested little nose going straight up in the air. Let's look at the next one. Here, again by Teresa Ellis. This is bringing, is being concerned with the thing which is interior and which, if it weren't for the making of images, could never be seen or known. And since it provides us with something which is beyond ourselves and something which is beyond our experience or anybody's experience. When you look at this marvelous cat, which is no way like a cat, and it's still absolutely a cat, and the way that it can stand here, it creates a whole world that we can visit when we look at it. We can enjoy it, and we can feel it's all of the catness of its dandiness, of its being a dandy. All cats have a kind of dandy quality. They want to be very neat and handsome, and they succeed. And this one wants also to ingratiate itself by offering us a flower. And this is impossible. You see, you're never going to encounter this cat. I mean, you may look the world over, and you will never know this cat. And yet now we know it as we don't know our own cat. Now this is a great gift, you see, that the artist can give us by making the dream real, by making the thing imagined, making the thing thought of real, so that we cannot forget it. And for this we're endlessly grateful, and we endlessly ourselves want to make graven images and want to rejoice in them. Thank you very much. They probably won't get it from me. Or else it'll start me on some great excursion into I don't know what. So, but nonetheless, if you have a question, you can either ask it or you can come up and ask me afterwards or anything. I want you to feel free to do that. I never get tired of talking about art and repeating what I believe to be true and think is important for everybody else to know too. So please feel free either to ask me now. I always have to have somebody interpret the question. I never can hear from a distance. So anybody have a question, just holler it out, and one of my interpreters here on the front row will tell you. There's somebody with a question.
Yeah. Can you further talk about the graven image?
Can you further talk about the graven image?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I could, of course, for several hours, but I think that the most important thing about the graven image is that it's in the Ten Commandments. And that means that art is a serious and furthermore inevitable action of all people. That is, we are people who make a graven image, and that's why we have to be careful with it, because it has immense power. And to think of art as not having power and as being something which is the expression of one person is just simply false, and furthermore it's disastrous for people to have, as it is for any lie. It's disastrous to have a lie in the middle of your thought. And the truth is that we cannot get enough of images. You know this by stepping out the door, and I'm walking downtown. It's full of images. And the newspaper, the magazines, and everything. Endlessly. We have a voracious appetite for images. And we make them, we buy them, we look for them, we look at them. It's an astounding thing, because this is absolutely a human being thing. find dogs leaping through magazines in the doctor's office, just to see somebody's face grinning or not grinning, or just to see the images in the magazine. I mean, my doctor, God forbid, only takes Sports Illustrated. This is very hard on my theory. I have very great difficulty of identifying, even figuring what they're doing there, much less who they are. That's another matter. But even so, I keep looking, and I look at them, jumping something or hitting something or doing all those sport things. And instead of contemplating my navel, not revealed, of course, in the doctor's office, but not where they're sitting in the lounge anyway. There are many other things I do: compose poetry, remember friends. There are lots of possibilities besides Sports Illustrated, and yet there I am. Another image, how wonderful. How absolutely satisfying. Another human face, another person making a funny face. I mean, it's our taste, it's our desire, and it has always been, and it's very dangerous. Because we can think that it's not going to affect us, but we are affected by the images that we see. And either consciously, both consciously and unconsciously, and they have enormous power over us. And it is simply true of us. And we are susceptible to images. And we can give them more power than, so there they are in the Ten Commandments. Their power is enough to threaten the sovereignty of God. And they're the only things that can do it, the graven image. So think about that. And watch out. Okay. Anybody else wants to ask something? Come up here and ask. And I know it. You've been sitting too long, you'll turn into the toadstools or something.